Hello and welcome to God in Jesus Christ Ministries. I am your host, Minister Michael M. Matthews. And I'd like to welcome you and thank you for letting me come into your home this evening. This is our second Bible study on Saturday as we are in the book of Moses. I'm sorry, not Moses, the book of Exodus. Well, the book of Moses. We're in the second chapter of Exodus. This is the second week of our Bible study. And we have two Bible studies that we do. We do one on Wednesday with same time, 6 o'clock. That is based on different topics. So we do different topics. And it's a series based on the topics. It's different series. This series here for Saturday in the book of Exodus, it's about a 8-week series. So we'll have 8 weeks. This is talking about the sovereignty of God, where God has his hands on everything, as you have seen in chapter 1. We talked about the increase of the Israelites. So with this, it is just basically a summary. As we go through, I will let you know what books we will be reading from, or what books we will be going into from the beginning of the books. We will let you know what books we will have done. In this term of Exodus chapter 2, I want you to know that we're not reading the chapter. I'm going to basically kind of like break summary down, just basically go over it in a summarized way. And I would prefer each and every one of y'all that are watching and that may be taking notes, go back to the book, read the book, read the chapters yourself, and get an understanding, regardless of what version of the Bible you're reading in, whether it's the New King James, whether it's the NIV, the ESV, or whatever Bible you, the Easy Read Bible, whichever one we read. I'm not gonna really try to go deep into everything. We're preparing for another type of Bible study for those type of things. But today we're going to be in the book of Exodus, chapter 2, verse 1 through 25. And we're going to be in chapter 3 and chapter 4. So, our Bible studies are Wednesdays and Saturdays, 6 p.m. We also have another one where we read the book and then break it down. That's on Facebook at 7 p.m. Monday to Thursday. That's on a contact created by the name of Detroit Lady Red. We're on her page. Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. I'm here. We'll do the Bible sermon. You can also we do a sermon on here at 8 a.m. You can also catch Sunday sermons on our podcast. We have our Sunday morning gospel music play from 9 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. Sometimes longer, depending on what we decide we want to play. That mostly the end of the month, it's much longer. Sometime in the beginning of the month, it's much longer. Beginning of the month, the first Sunday is probably longer, or maybe 5 hours. Another at the end of the month, it's another 5 hours. But in between, we have our 24-hour radio station, which is the World Gospel Radio. Yes, World Gospel Radio. And that plays 24/7. Nothing but gospel. No other type of no other genre of music. It's just straight gospel all the way through. But it is different types of gospel songs. It's not just you may hear Christian, you may hear country version of a song, you may hear R&B version of a gospel song, but it's strictly will be only gospel music played, Christian gospel, and today's gospel, maybe even rap. And can't get the hang of what the new term for the rap for the gospel, but the new age gospel you probably get and things like that. But that's what we're striving to. So you get your praise on, and we suggest you tune in and get your praise on. If you want to know where to hear these things at, go to our website, which is God in Jesus Christ Ministries God in Jesus Christ Ministries.org, and you can tap onto the links there, and it'll take you straight to whatever you want to listen to. The RBM Smooth Radio, which plays the gospel music. That Sunday, if you want to hear gospel music, just tap on that at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you should hear the gospel music come on in. It may be a little bit off. I mean, it may be a little bit after 9 when it comes on, depending on the record that's playing before it, but it'll be there, and you'll probably go from, like I said, from 9 o'clock all the way to 11:30, maybe even to maybe 3 hours or 4 hours longer. But let's get into this Exodus chapter 2, verse 1 through 25. So as we had said in the earlier previous chapter, we were talking about Joseph and his brothers and the Pharaoh that he was under. And then the new Pharaoh comes along after Joseph, and the other Pharaoh dies. Because Joseph had saved his brothers from the famine. His father has passed away. So the 12 tribes have the 12 sons, well, the 11 sons that were there, and the 12, and Joseph had passed away. So the Hebrews are growing in multitude. And we see that the Pharaoh, the new Pharaoh, he's afraid that they're growing in multitude. They may join the other tribes around the area and help them to go against them. So he doesn't want that to happen. So he puts taskmasters over them because he wants them to build the city. He afflicts them with their burden, and they are to build for Pharaoh the supply cities. And this is Pithom, if I'm pronouncing, I hope I'm not pronouncing it right. Pithom, and Ramsey. Pithom and Ramsey. Those are the two supply cities. So the supply cities are where they have, where they store their food, grain, ammunition, weapons, anything like that. And we see this in verse 10 and 11. God, seeing the affliction that is being put on the multitude of them, so the Egyptians made the children suffer, made the Israel children suffer more with rigor. So they put more genuine problems on them. Put more on them to work harder. The Hebrew, and then he went to the Hebrew life. He's in their bond, in their bit of bondage. So in their bit of bondage, Pharaoh was making sure that they were not gonna grow in numbers. But God has his plan. Man has his plan. God's plan was they're gonna grow, no matter what you do. Now, what happens is he gets the midwife birthright. You know, he gets the he tells the midwives he wants to have any child that is born, any man child that is born, they are to be cast into the river. So they are to be cast in the river. Okay, so they are to be cast in the river. So he goes and he speaks to the midwives. Those are the midwives are the ones who help give birth to the Hebrew women. And he talks to Shephrah, and the other one is Putta. And he tells them that when the Hebrew women sit on the birth stool, and the birth stool is when they go to give birth, if it's a son, he wants them to kill it. But if it's a female, then she can live. She lives. Save them. But But the midwives, being afraid of God, they don't obey that command. They kind of save the children. Also, on top of that, while they're saving the children, and as we see, that was in chapter 1. Now we come to chapter 2. And in verse 1 through 4, we see there's a Levite man. He takes a wife. He takes a wife of a daughter of a Levite. Now, the Levites are a priest. They are a priest. Now, why do you think, I'm going to ask you a question. Why do you think God made sure that it was a Levite priest, a Levite man, than anybody else? What was the purpose of that? Why did he do that in that case? If there was anybody else, a Levite, why he had to come from the tribe of Levite? Keep that in mind. We'll find out later. But keep that in mind. Okay, so he became a Levite, and they had a son. They married her. They had a son. She saw that the son was beautiful. She couldn't kill her son. So she hid him for 3 months. 3 months of this hiding, after a while, she couldn't hide him no more. She realized she couldn't hide him no more. So she built this sort of like basket. In the King James Version, I think it says ark. So she built this basket for him. Protected it so that it wouldn't sink or the baby wouldn't get wet. And she put it afloat in the reeds. And the reeds are what you see when you're near water and you see the little thin look like plants coming up. Those are reeds. That's what they call the reeds. And his sister followed, but she was far off, just enough so that she could see where it was going and watch where it was going. And now we see that Pharaoh's daughter, she sees the basket that she's bathing in the stream, in the river, and she sees the basket. And she opens it and she sees the babe. Moses' sister comes and asks Pharaoh's daughter, do you want me to find a Hebrew woman to nurse the child? And the Hebrew woman was Moses' mother. Moses' mother was the one who nursed her own son. She was the one who wound up nursing her own son. And that's another ironic thing that we must see God had his hand in. One, he had the Levite man marry his mother. And when she put Moses in the water, his sister followed her. Sister went to the Pharaoh's daughter, asked the Pharaoh, do you want me to go get a Hebrew woman? She went and got her own mother, and his mother is nursing her own son. So she still nursed her own son. He still was being nursed by his own mother. So that was it. Pharaoh's daughter named named the babe Moses, because she drew him out of the water, and that's what it meant, to draw out. Moses is to draw out, Exodus is to come out. So, and Moses grew up in Pharaoh's home, and he went out. And so at this time, you see he's growing up in Pharaoh's home, and he went out, and he sees his brothers, and he looks upon their burden. He's looking upon their burden, and he sees. And we read in verse 11 and 14, Moses, at this time, Moses had wound up killing an Egyptian. And Moses killed an Egyptian. When he was beating another Hebrew. So what happened? The Egyptian was beating another Hebrew, and Moses came in and intervened and wound up killing the Hebrew. And then we see later, as you read further down a little more, it came the next day, Moses' or 2 days later, Moses is coming around, and he saw the two Hebrew men. He saw these two Hebrew men fighting, and he asked, "Who did?" He asked, like he's asking, "Who are you? Who are you fighting?" Uh, who? No, I'm sorry. He said, "Who did wrong?" He asked, "Who did wrong?" So in other words, it's not, what are you fighting for? It's who did wrong? Who did wrong? And then they answered back, why are you, and he's also asked him again, why are you striking your companion? So Moses is saying, who did wrong? Why are you striking your companion? And then they say, or one of them says back to him, who made you prince and judge over us? Which over us, and this also, will you kill us like you killed the Egyptian? So with that statement that was said, Moses realized that they knew he killed the Egyptian. They knew he hid the Egyptian. So now he knows that I gotta leave, because back then, killing, if you were of a different ethnicity and you killed another ethnicity, you could it would cause a greater crime for you. In other words, if it was like an Egyptian killing an Egyptian, I can't say but it's not that severe. But now you're a Hebrew killing an Egyptian, it's a different story, or maybe if I don't know how that way it is, but if you're a Hebrew killing an Egyptian, it's a punishment. It's a severe punishment. So Moses realizes it now. Moses knows. He now knows. They know he killed the Egyptian. So he knows they killed the Egyptian. So he's like, oh, okay, I got to get out of here. And when Pharaoh heard about, he took to kill Moses. He looked to kill Moses. So when he heard about this, he looked to kill Moses. So Moses fled from Pharaoh, from Pharaoh's face, as the book says. He fled from Pharaoh's face. And he dwelled in a land called Midian. And he sat down. So he sat down by this well. Now the land of Midian had a priest he had 7 daughters. This priest had 7 daughters, and we know that from this story, if you read the story, it's Jethro who was his daughters, and the daughters came to the well and drew water, and they filled their troughs to water their father's flock, and we see this in verse 11 in chapter 2, and I'm sorry, verse 17 in chapter 2. We also see then the sheep herders came and was driving the flock away. So the shepherds came. I said the sheep herders. Well, the sheep herders. So they were driving the flock away. Moses stood up, and Moses had stood up and then watered their flock. So Moses stood and watered their flock. Then we see in verse 18, they came to Raphael's their father, and he asked, why are you back so soon? Because he knew it'd take him some time, because these people are walking and it's going to take them some time. They said an Egyptian delivered us from the hands of the shepherds, and he also drew enough water. He drew enough water for us and water for the flock, which is stated in verse, which was also, actually we see that it's stated in verse 19. So he told his daughters, go get the Egyptian, which was Moses, so we can eat bread. We can break bread together. Moses lived with the man, and the man gave his daughter Zephra. So he gave Zephra to Moses. I think if you look at Cecil B. DeMille's we see Zephra, he picks Zephra out of it. Instead of he builds, they show it that he picks it. She bores him a son, and he names him Gershon. Gershon. I have been the name called Gershon, and I have been a stranger in a foreign land, which is the meaning of his name, would be the meaning of his name. That's why he named him that. Now the king in Egypt at that time had died, but the children of Israel was still ruined from the bondage that they were in, and they crying out to God, and God remembers the promise he remembers the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God looked upon them and acknowledged them. So God says, okay, I'm going to look upon you, I'm going to acknowledge you, and I'm going to send you Moses. Now, they hear the cries. God hears their cries. He sees this. So now, we're going to go to turn your books to chapter 13. Chapter 3. I don't know why I said 13. Chapter 3. Now, we're with Moses. He's living in this land with his wife and his son. And while Moses is tending the flock, which was owned by his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of the Midians, while tending the flock, he comes to a mountain, Mount Herod, the mountain of God. So this is the mountain of God, as they call it, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to in a flame of fire from the midst of a burning bush. So now this is where God is now. His essence is of that burning bush. The bush is consumed in fire, but it's not burning like you would normally see. From what the description in the book says, it's not burning like you would see a normal bush burn. It's a different type of fire that he sees. So the bush is not burning. So Moses went up to see this great sight, as it says. He went to see this great sight. And we can read in verse 4, the Lord called to Moses, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am, here am I. So here am I. And God tells him, take off your sandals, because the place you're at is on holy ground. And he takes off his sandals. And he lets him know he was the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. God told him he saw the oppression of his people, the Hebrews, Israel, and he heard their cries. So God letting Moses know, I heard the people's cry. I hear the people's cry. I heard them cry out to me. I've heard my people cry out to me. And that's why Moses is there, because he's bringing Moses to the people. He's going to bring Moses to them. He hear their cry outs. Now, with that, God. So we're still on chapter 3. So God lets Moses know he had came down to deliver them from Egypt. So he came down. God came down from there onto this mountain to let them know that he is now going to take them out of the land of Egypt and bring them to a land of milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites. So he's going to bring them to the Canaanites. and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hittites, and the Jebusites. God tells Moses, so this is Moses, this is now Moses' calling. This is what this is. He is now giving Moses his, what you probably read in a few other verses, or you heard people say, it's his charge. He's calling Moses to let Moses know, this is where you're going here. He tells Moses he will send him to Pharaoh to bring the people out of Egypt. Now Moses, here's Moses, he's giving excuses. Moses is saying, he's giving excuses to God. He's telling God, oh, wait a minute. He's like, wait a minute. So Moses says, who is he that he go to Egypt and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And he's like, I can't speak. I stutter. I can't speak. I'm not eloquent. I don't have these elegant words to speak to a person like Pharaoh. And God lets Moses know that he will not be alone. He will not be alone here. He's not. God is like saying, well, don't worry about it. I'm going to have you. God's saying to him, don't worry about it. I'm going to have your back. I got your back. You just go do what I say do. I got your back. Okay? So, to the mountain to serve God. He wants him to bring the people from there, bring them to the mountain. They're gonna worship and serve me here. And then we're going to send them off to the land of milk and honey. Moses, the God of Father, sent me. So he tells Moses, I want you to let him know that he sent me. So he says, how will they know that I came from, you sent me? How will, if I tell the people that you sent me, how will they know? And he says, say this to them, I am who I am. And he lets them know, I am who I am. So when he says that, when he makes that statement to them, which would be in their Hebrew word, and I really don't want to bust that word up, so that's why I didn't mention it, because I have to really get the terminology, not the terminology, but the linguistics of the Hebrew word. So I don't want to botch it up. I want to kind of practice saying it, because I hear a lot of people say Yahweh, Yahshua, and things like that. And I've heard over the course of my studies and learning that it's not Yahshua, it's Yeshua. Like we say Yahweh, Yahweh. There's different. There's a linguistics that the way we're pronouncing it and the way the name is pronounced. So when you go to look at it in its entirety from the English version and looking at it in Hebrew, you got to look at the little markings, what the markings mean over certain letters, because in Hebrew they don't have vowels. I think Russia is another one that don't have vowels. I learned that back in radio when I was attending radio school. We saw one of the Russian leaders' name in Russian, and it was all just regular letters. There was no A, I, E, O, U. It was just K, U. Wasn't like, okay, how do I say this name? How do you break this down? And they couldn't break it down. I was like, I can't break this down. I don't know what I'm going to do here. And then another young man sitting next to me, he figured out the system and he was able to break it down. He kind of showed me, but I was like, I still was lost. Sometimes it takes one or two or three times before you really catch on. But he said you kind of like where a vowel should have been, that's where you would input he would kind of always tell me that's where you would put the vowel in there to get the word, to get the name. So like we would say Khrushchev is because it may not have a E or an I or whatever. That's how you would figure it out. So I said, okay. But that's one thing. That's why I didn't mention it. So now we're going to look at chapter 4. And that was, so we did 2 and 3. And now we're going to do chapter 4. And the verse in chapter 4 of Exodus, verses 1 through 13. Now Moses has got his charge. He's got his calling, and he's going on. So now Moses asks, what if they, now he's asking, we still at the mountain, what if they don't believe me? God tells him, pick up the rod, take it in your hand. He picks up the rod, puts it in his hand. He said, take the rod in your hand. The rod that's in your hand, put it on the ground. He puts it on the ground. He told him, put it on the ground, cast it to the ground. He cast the rod to the ground. Excuse me. The rod turns into a serpent, which is a snake. The rod turns into a serpent. God told Moses, grab it by the tail. He grabs it by the tail. Once he grabs it by the tail, the serpent turns back into a rod. So why do you think that happened? What was the reason for God doing that? So now there's 3 questions now that I would like for you to answer after this, when you get the opportunity to answer. Why did he have Moses' mother marry the priest? Why did he have him marry a Levite? Why was Moses' mother married to a Levite? Why did she marry a Levite? Second question. After that, here's the how did it come to pass that his sister would go and get, how ironic, what was the plan? Why? Let me get it together. I'm sorry, it's not 3, it's 2. The Levite. Why was his mother married to a Levite? Okay. The second part is, here we have the turning the snake. Why, when he grabbed the tail, why did it all of a sudden turn into a snake? What was the purpose of that too? What do you think, or what was God's purpose there? Also, what would have happened? What do you think would have happened if his sister didn't see Pharaoh pick Moses up out of the river? She probably got, let's say she didn't get there in time to see him pick up. She didn't see him, and she didn't go to have Moses' own mother nurse him. What you think would have happened then? What would you think the story would come about the same way? That's the questions I would like for you to ask. So these are God's. So do you think God would, if something would have happened in that part, do you think it would have still turned out the same way? Just asking. Okay, so it turned back into a rod. This is, so God lets them know, this is the way the people would know God sent you. So he's letting them know, this rod that you have that's able to turn into a snake, can turn from a rod to a snake. They will know I sent God. God sent you. That's what he's telling Moses there. God had Moses put his hand. He gave him another one. He had his hand, put his hand in his bosom. When Moses brings it out, it's white. It's like a leprosy. It's like leopards. And he pulls it out. It's like leopards. He puts it back, pulls it out again. He changes it back. So Moses has now seen Moses got his call. He's getting his calling from God, and he's understanding now. So he's got his understanding. So his calling is going to come from God. So now God tells Moses that if they don't listen to your voice or believe that the two signs, don't believe the two signs, then take water from the river. Listen closely. Take water from the river, pour it on the ground, pour it to the ground, right? The water will become blood in the dry ground. So the water will become blood to the dry ground. The Lord, I am not, Moses making excuses again. Lord, I am not eloquent. He says he's slow to speak, slow of speech, and slow of tongue. So meaning he stutters. He stutters. God lets Moses know that he will be with him and teach you what you should say. So he's letting him know, don't worry about it. I'll teach you what you should say. Moses asked for God to send someone else in his place. So we're going to stop right there. We're going to stop right there at 4 where he says he's going to ask him. Well, as a matter of fact, it does stop right there for part 4 in chapter 4. He basically says, please send somebody else, God. Don't send me. So Moses wants God to send somebody else. He doesn't want to send him. He's feeling like, hey, this is a big task you're asking me to do. You're asking me to go talk to a high-ranking, the leader of the Egyptians, and I'm just merely. It look like I'm just a merely old. Right now, I'm a merely old. I'm just a mere shepherd. I'm just tending to the flock. He says no. God says no. You're going to do these things. You're going to go. And ironic. So Moses got his calling. He's making excuses. He got his calling. The ironic thing is that his mother is the one who nurses him. That's a real ironic thing about that. And then we see that now he's getting ready to go. So now for week 3, when we go back, here's the books that we're going to go into for you, so you'll be able to probably read up on them and get an understanding and the topics that we'll be talking about. So, and for week 3, next Saturday, we're going to go in chapter 4. We'll finish up from 28 to 31. That's in Exodus 4, chapter 4. And then we're going to also do Exodus chapter 5. We'll go from 1 through 8. And then we're going to go to chapter 7, which will be 1 to 13. The topics of those will also, once again, will be the sovereignty, the pride, the power, and also the 10 plagues. So we have the sovereignty. For the topics, we have the sovereignty, the pride, the power, and the 10 plagues. Those 4 things will be the topics that we will speak on, and this will be in each of these chapters that we'll be talking about. So once again, if you want to know what the chapters will be, if you get an opportunity, well, not this the start of the week, at the start of the beginning of the week, go to God in Jesus Christ Ministries.org, and you will see our the time schedule for our services, for our Bible studies, and you will see what scriptures we're on or what books we're on in that. And also you'll see the time for what times we play music and things like that, and our Sunday service. And until then, may God bless you, and may all be well.